Ever catch yourself wondering what makes companies tick? I'm not just talking about the we make stuff, you buy stuff basics. I'm talking about the strategy underneath, the stuff that truly makes or breaks them.
Right, like what's the secret sauce?
Exactly. So today we're diving deep into a book that unpacks all of that. Business Model Generation by Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur. It's become a bit of a Bible for understanding how businesses are built, challenged, and sometimes totally reinvented.
It's true. And the best part, this isn't just some theoretical MBA jargon.
Yeah, 470 innovators from the real world weighed in. So it's practical, visual, and packed with examples you can actually use.
100%. And speaking of practical and visual, can we talk about the business model canvas for a sec?
Oh, it's iconic for a reason, right? It breaks down a company's core elements, like visually, so you can see how everything connects.
Like a blueprint, but for your business. It's got 9 building blocks. Each one's super important.
Okay, 9 building blocks. Break it down for us. What are they, and why should we care?
So take customer segments, for example. This is where you define exactly who you're serving. And not just generally, but what do they need, what do they want, what makes them tick.
Makes sense. It's about getting specific.
Totally. And that ties directly into the value proposition block. This is all about what makes your product or service irresistible to that customer. Why should they choose you over everyone else?
Okay, so you've got your target customer and your awesome product or service. What's next?
Well, you got to figure out how to reach those customers, right? That's where channels come in. Think online, retail stores, maybe even something totally unique to your business.
So, like your distribution strategy.
Exactly. Then there's customer relationships. How are you going to build loyalty and keep those customers coming back for more?
Okay, this is sounding like marketing 101, but way more high level.
Oh, it goes way deeper than just marketing. You've also got to think about your revenue streams. How are you actually making money from all of this? And on the flip side, your cost structure. What are your biggest expenses? What resources are essential to your operation?
Right, the classic balancing act of any business. But it can't just be about crunching numbers, can it?
You got it. That's where key activities come in. These are the most important things your business does to deliver that irresistible value proposition.
Got it. And to do those key activities, you need.
Key resources. And these aren't just about money. We're talking intellectual property, skilled team, maybe even unique tech that gives you an edge.
And finally, no business is an island, right? So there's.
Key partnerships. Who can you collaborate with to make your business even stronger?
Wow, okay, so the canvas lays out all these elements, but the real magic is seeing how they work together.
100%. And that's where it gets really interesting because business model generation takes it a step further. It shows how these elements often combine to form recognizable patterns. They call them business model archetypes. It's like the DNA of successful companies.
Business model archetypes, I like it.
Uh,
Give us an example. What's one of these patterns that we might recognize from our own lives?
okay. Ever bought something super niche online? Something you'd probably never find in a store?
Oh, all the time.
That, my friend, is the power of the long tail. It's a business model archetype that's been a game changer for companies like Netflix and Amazon.
Okay, the long tail. Refresh our memory, though. How does it actually work?
Basically, instead of just focusing on those few blockbuster products that everyone buys, they offer a huge E or E variety, catering to even the most specific interests. They're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're being something to those underserved niches, and it's a huge part of their success.
Wait, so you're telling me that selling a ton of different things, even if each one only appeals to a small number of people, can actually be a winning strategy?
You got it. And it's not just Netflix. Think about Amazon. They've got millions of products, and a surprising amount of their revenue comes from those more obscure items that a traditional store wouldn't even bother stocking.
Wow, it's like they've unlocked a whole new realm of retail possibilities. I know I've definitely been on the receiving end of that, finding those one-of-a-kind things online.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of understanding these business model patterns. Once you see them, you start noticing them everywhere.
So we've got the long tail for those niche markets. What other fascinating business models are hiding in plain sight?
Well, this next one is probably even more familiar, and it's behind some of the biggest companies out there. Multi-sided platforms.
Okay, like Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Connecting people to each other and to advertisers.
Exactly. But it's not just social media. Think about Google connecting people to information and advertisers through their search engine, or Uber connecting riders and drivers. These platforms create value by facilitating interactions between different groups. And the more users they get on each side, the more valuable they become for everyone.
It's like this snowball effect of growth. But it makes you wonder, did those companies start out with that multi-sided approach in mind, or did they stumble upon it?
That's a question the book really digs into, and it varies. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's accidental brilliance. But the key takeaway is that understanding how these multi-sided platforms work is essential for navigating the business world today.
Totally. Okay, so we've got the long tail, we've got multi-sided platforms. Any other patterns we should have on our radar?
Ready for one that seems kind of counterintuitive at first. It's called Free IE as a business model.
Hold on, free. How can any business survive, let alone thrive, if they're not charging for anything?
That's the million-dollar question, right? But business model generation breaks down how companies use free strategically to attract a massive user base and then monetize in really creative ways.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I need an example because right now I'm drawing a blank.
Think about Skype. They revolutionized communication by offering free calls, which totally disrupted the long-distance market. But how do they make money if the core service is free? Freemium.
Freemium, is that what we're calling it these days?
Hey, it works. Basically, they give you a basic service for free. In Skype's case, it was those free calls to other Skype users. But then they offer premium features for a price, like calling landlines or having group video calls.
Ah, so they get you hooked with the free stuff, you see the value, and then bam, they offer the extras you're happy to pay for.
Precisely. And there are all sorts of variations on this free model. Some companies use ads to subsidize the cost of their free service, while others offer free trials to hook you and convert you to a paying customer.
It's like a whole new way of thinking about pricing. It's not just about setting a price tag anymore. It's about figuring out how to create value and then monetize it in ways that make sense for your business and your customers.
Exactly, and that's what I love about this book. It really challenges those old school assumptions about how businesses operate and opens your mind to new possibilities.
Okay, so we've got the long tail, multi-sided platforms, and this mind-bending concept of free as a business model. Anything else we're missing?
Well, there's one that's super relevant in today's world: open business models.
Open.
Yeah.
Like sharing is caring, but in the business world. Tell me more.
It's not quite that simple, but the core idea is that companies can actually benefit from being more collaborative, more open to external innovation. Instead of keeping their R&D totally secret, they tap into the knowledge of outside partners.
So kind of like crowdsourcing innovation.
That's a great way to put it. And the book uses Procter & Gamble as a prime example. They adopted this open innovation approach and saw a huge boost in their R&D productivity.
It's like admitting you don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected places.
Totally. And in a world that's increasingly complex, being open to those outside ideas can be a game changer.
This is all fascinating, but I can already see how it can feel overwhelming, especially for bigger companies that are used to doing things a certain way. It's like, okay, I get that these new models are out there, but how do I actually adapt and evolve my business in response?
Such a good point. And the book doesn't just leave you hanging. There's a whole section on unbundling and reinvention, where they talk about how even the biggest companies need to evolve to stay ahead.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. I love a good reinvention story. What's unbundling all about?
In a nutshell, it's companies realizing that different parts of their business might actually be more effective as independent entities.
So breaking it down, almost like creating separate startups within a larger organization.
Exactly. Think about mobile phone companies. Remember when drop calls were like the worst thing ever?
Oh, totally. Back in the day, it was all about coverage.
Right. But as tech got better, just having a good network wasn't enough. They realized what they really had was their brand and their customers. So instead of trying to do it all, they started unbundling, like spinning off their network infrastructure into a separate company so they could focus more on cool services and stuff.
Makes sense. That would make them way more adaptable, right? Focus on what they're good at, partner up for the rest.
Exactly. And unbundling isn't just for telecoms. The book talks about the Swiss watch industry. Remember, they were getting Sigro-rooched by those cheaper quartz watches from Asia.
Oh, right. Like on the verge of disappearing.
Practically. Then Nicholas Hayek comes along, total visionary, creates the Swatch Group, brings all these struggling Swiss watchmakers together.
Yeah.
But instead of trying to compete on price, he's like, let's create something totally new. The Swatch. Affordable, stylish, fun.
And it was huge E. They tapped into this whole new market, younger people who cared about fashion, but they still had those high-end brands for prestige. Talk about a comeback.
It's like the perfect example of how unbundling can revitalize an entire industry. They could explore new stuff without being held back by their old way of doing things.
This is giving me so many ideas. This book really makes you look at business differently.
And we're just getting started. There's so much more, like how to analyze the business world around you, how to pick the right model. It's like they're giving us X-ray vision for business.
Okay, pause for a second. I need to process all this. We've got the canvas, we've got these business model patterns, but I feel like there's a piece missing.
You're right. And it's something people often overlook. It's not enough to have a killer business model. You also have to understand the environment you're operating in. It's like you wouldn't go sailing without checking the weather forecast, right?
Okay, that's a great analogy.
Right.
So what are the weather conditions we need to watch out for in the business world?
The book breaks it down into four main areas: market forces, industry forces, key trends, and macroeconomic forces. Let's start with market forces. This is all about your customers. What do they need? What do they want? And how is that changing?
Makes sense. Even the coolest product's gonna flop if it doesn't solve a problem people actually have, right?
100%. And then there's industry forces. This is about knowing your competition. Who are the big players? What are their strengths and weaknesses? Are there any newcomers shaking things up?
It sounds like a constant game of chess.
You got it. Speaking of staying ahead, there's key trends. This is where you gotta have your finger on the pulse. New tech, regulation changes, what's happening in society, spotting those things can create huge opportunities or totally disrupt you if you're not paying attention.
So eyes on the prize, but also like the bigger picture around you? What about those economic forces that are totally out of our control?
You're talking about macroeconomic forces, the economy as a whole, interest rates, inflation, access to capital. They can make or break you no matter how good your idea is.
This is a lot to take in. How do you even wrap your head around it all?
That's where the book's practical side comes in. It gives you tools to analyze those forces, see how they might impact you, and this is key, find opportunities for innovation within them.
So it's not just about reacting, it's about being proactive, using that knowledge to shape your strategy.
Not 100%. The book encourages you to look at it from different angles, like that new tech that seems scary. Maybe it's also a huge opportunity for another part of your business.
Turning a problem into a possibility. I love it.
Exactly. That's strategic thinking change is going to happen. The question is, can you use it to your advantage?
All right, we've covered a lot. We've got the canvas, the business model patterns. We've talked about how companies can adapt and reinvent themselves, and now these external forces that are at play. But how do we put this into practice? Like, what are the actual steps to either create a new business model or give an existing one a makeover?
That's where the real magic of business model generation happens. It doesn't just give you concepts, it gives you a process, the business model design process.
Okay, walk me through it.
5 phases: mobilize, understand, design, implement, and manage. Each one builds on the one before it. So you start with mobilize. This is about setting the stage for innovation, getting everyone excited, putting together the right team, defining what you're actually trying to achieve.
So building momentum, getting everyone on board.
Exactly. Especially in bigger companies where people can get stuck in their ways, you need that shared understanding that innovation isn't optional, it's essential.
That makes sense. Okay, let's say we've got everyone on board, fired up, ready to innovate. What's next?
Time to understand. This is where you dive into research. Who are your customers? What's the competition like? What are the big trends in your industry? It's about asking the right questions to uncover those aha moments that will spark new ideas.
I can see how this part could get overwhelming fast. There's so much information out there. How do you not get lost?
You got to stay focused. What are you actually trying to achieve?
Yep.
What are the essential things you need to know? Be strategic. Don't drown in data.
That's good advice for life in general. Okay, so we've got our team, we've done our research, we've got insights. Now what?
Now for the fun part, design. This is where you start generating ideas for your business model. Brainstorm, sketch things out, try different approaches.
Love it. Let those creative juices flow.
It's all about iteration. You might start with a rough idea, then refine it, test it, get feedback, and refine it again. It's not about getting it perfect right away. It's about being willing to experiment.
So embrace the process, not get hung up on perfection.
Exactly. And the book talks a lot about collaboration in this phase. Get people from different backgrounds together. That's where the magic really happens.
That makes me think of how we create this podcast. Our writers, our sound engineers, editors, everyone brings something unique to the table.
It's a team effort. And just like in podcasting, you need that balance of creativity and structure. Give space for ideas, but also have a clear process so everyone's working towards the same goal.
Love it. Okay, so we've got a promising business model prototype. What's next? We got to actually, do something with it, right?
You got it. It's time to implement. This is where you take that idea and make it real in the world.
No pressure, right? Easy to say, harder to do.
It's true. Implementation can be the toughest part. It takes planning, leadership, and being able to adapt along the way.
So not just sticking to the plan no matter what, but being flexible when you need to be.
Yep. Things change, obstacles pop up, opportunities you didn't even see before present themselves.
hmm
You got to be ready for anything.
So flexibility, resourcefulness, and keeping your eye on the big picture.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final phase, manage. This is where you track how your new model's doing, make adjustments, and make sure it's built to last.
So this is where we become business model caretakers, making sure it thrives.
Think of it less like caretaking, more like gardening. You plant the seeds, you nurture them, but you also got to prune, fertilize, adapt to the changing seasons.
I like that. So you're constantly evaluating, making sure your business model is still relevant, still effective.
Exactly. The best companies never stop learning and improving. They treat their business model as a work in progress, always looking for ways to create more value and stay ahead of the game.
This has been eye-opening. It feels like a whole new way of looking at how businesses work and what it takes to be successful.
Me too. And honestly, we're just scratching the surface of what business model generation covers. It's packed with so many examples and tools that you can actually put to use right away.
It really is true, though, isn't it? The one thing you can count on in business is that things will change.
Absolutely. And that's what makes the tools from this book so valuable. Like that business model canvas, it's not just a snapshot in time. It's something you can constantly revisit, revise, make sure you're still on track.
Okay, so it's like a roadmap, but one you can adjust as you go, depending on the terrain.
100%. And, one thing that really struck me about the book is that it's not just about the numbers, the data, the frameworks.
There's a human element to it, too, right?
Exactly. At the end of the day, the most successful businesses are the ones that understand people, their needs, their desires, what makes them tick.
You've got to build something people actually want, and in a way that resonates with them.
100%.
You
This
know,
has been a fantastic deep dive, by the way.
I was just thinking the same thing. It's amazing how much ground we've covered, from those basic building blocks all the way to, the bigger picture of how companies adapt and thrive.
And we've only scratched the surface. Business model generation is full of even more examples, tools, stuff you can use today.
Which is what it's all about.
Yeah.
So, dear listener, here's what we want you to take away from this. Don't just listen passively. Put on your thinking caps. Start looking at businesses through this new lens.
Yeah. Next time you see a company doing something cool, something that makes you wonder, how does that work?
Yeah.
Try sketching out their business model canvas.
I love that. It's like a game.
Yeah.
What are their customer segments? What's their value proposition? Are they a long tail, a multi-sided platform, something totally new?
Exactly. And think about those external forces we talked about. What's the weather like for them? Any big changes coming that could shake things up?
Become a business model detective.
Exactly. And here's a question for you to ponder. If you were starting a business today, what problem would you solve? What kind of value could you bring to the world?
Those are some big questions. But we believe in you. And hey, if you've got thoughts, share them with us on social media. Use the hashtag Deep Dive Business Models. We love hearing from you.
And of course, pick up a copy of Business Model Generation. It's one of those books that can really change the way you see the world and how businesses operate within it.
Couldn't agree more. All right, that's a wrap for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of business models. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing, keep innovating, and we'll see you out there in the world, making it a better, more business-savvy place.